Open world games have been riding high since Grand Theft Auto 3. People no longer want to go through linear levels, people want a big open sandbox they can explore and mess around in. Thanks to consoles becoming more powerful, this has allowed for larger and more complex open worlds. The last generation had seen a lot of different open world games, including Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, GTA, The Elder Scrolls and many more. Personally, I find open world games to be very hit and miss. I've enjoyed games such as Red Dead Redemption and Fallout 3 as I found those open worlds to be interesting places to explore, but I couldn't get sucked into games such as GTA 5 or Skyrim. With so many open world games out there, I either go all in and put in hours and hours into an open world game, or I just couldn't care less. This brings me to one of the first open world games to come out for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. From the trailers it seemed like everything that people wanted from a Lord of the Rings game, a chance to explore Middle-earth with non-human powers. I liked the Lord of the Rings, but I could only get so excited for Middle-earth as they've been pumping out Lord of the Rings games for over 10 years now, with not many of them being that good. I picked it up anyway, so is Middle-earth the first great open world game for the next gen systems? Sorry Watch Dogs. Or is this just another bland open world game, like Watch Dogs? Let's check it out. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor takes place in the Lord of the Rings universe, set between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. The game starts with a ranger trapped in the Wraith world. In a cool mix between an opening cutscene and a tutorial, it is revealed that the guard was on top of the Black Gate of Mordor when the gate was attacked. The ranger was murdered along with his family, so he is now dead. While in this world, the ranger meets a wraith called Celebrimbor, who revives him and they are now tied together. They then both set out to try and get revenge against Sauron for the fact that they've both been murdered. Throughout the game you find more about Celebrimbor's past, which involves him being heavily involved in the events that set in Lord of the Rings in motion. Apart from these flashbacks though to his past, the story is very limited. There isn't much that really happens. You track down Sauron's forces and meet a few people on the way. There are 20 main missions, but half of them are just helping out random characters that have no impact on the overall plot, such as hunting with a random dwarf. Open world games do tend to meander more with the plot as they are usually longer games, but as this game only has 20 main missions, it feels a little strange how little plot there is. It feels like they just needed a setup where the player is able to control a human with wraith powers. Without giving any spoilers, the ending is also very weak. It ends with a quick time event, nothing is resolved, and is purposely left open-ended. The story doesn't get in the way of the gameplay, but if you want a new interesting story set in the Lord of the Rings universe, you're going to be disappointed. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is a third-person open-world action game. As I've already said the phrase open world a stupid amount of times, let's start off by looking at the game's setting. The game is set in Mordor before it was turned into a complete wasteland, so while it's still infested with orcs, there are ruins and strongholds to be found. I'll start with the positives of the open world. It's first off one of these games where you can easily find yourself distracted when heading to a destination. There is a quick travel, but it's hard not to find small things to do when you're heading to your next mission. I'll talk more about the side missions later in the review, but you will find yourself naturally exploring due to the large amount of stuff to do and see. There are two main problems I have with the open world however. The first is that there's very little range to the environments. There's the brown parts, there's the part with rocks, and then there's the green part. This means that you don't get the feeling of exploring a proper landscape as everything looks very similar. It's not a horrible game to look at, but it doesn't do anything visually to stand out. My second problem with the open world is that it's split into two. I found the open world to be surprisingly small when I first played, but just over halfway through the game you get to travel to a whole new region. This doubles the size of the open world, but these two regions are completely separate. You can't run from one to the other, instead you have to quick travel between them, meaning that you have to sit through a loading screen every time you want to go between the two. It breaks the immersion, and for a game that's released on the PS4 and the Xbox One, it's embarrassing. There are games on the PS2 that had bigger open worlds that didn't need to split it into two like this. If the two regions were decent sized open worlds by themselves, then I wouldn't have too much of a problem, but they're both quite small. Each region is dense enough that it doesn't ruin the exploration factor, but a smaller overall open world would have been better than a bigger open world that had to be split into two. While I have spent the last minute complaining about the open world, there is something that makes it unique and stand out. You can hunt down and manipulate Sauron's forces using the nemesis system. There are 3 ranks in Sauron's army: grunts, captains and war chiefs, who are ranked by their power level. Their power level dictates how hard they are to hunt and kill. You also have your own power level that increases when killing Sauron's forces, and you need to increase this in order to unlock new abilities. What makes this nemesis system cool though is that the orc actually exists in the world at all times and has its own personality, strengths and weaknesses. You can learn about the best tactic to take out each orc by interrogating lower level orc. As these orcs are present in the open world at all times, this means that you can have unique experiences with your encounters with them. You can either choose to hunt them down yourself by completing side missions that appear on the map, or allow yourself to naturally find them when exploring. Once you find one, you can either kill them, let them escape when they run away, take control of them using wraith powers, or if you get killed by them, they actually get a promotion and increase in power. While the general experience is the same, every person playing this game will have their own unique encounters when taking down Sauron's army, which is great. This doesn't mean the system is perfect though. When completing unrelated side missions, it's very easy to run into a grunt or a captain. I like that you can run into them without trying, but there were times when I had 4 different grunts and captains attacking me when all I wanted to do is to finish a task or mission. The other problem I have with the nemesis system comes from the open world being split into 2. The ranks are split across the 2 regions that are completely separate from each other. This meant that while I enjoyed playing around with the nemesis system in the first region, I lost all interest because it was essentially reset for the rest of the game. It's still a good idea, but it feels like the first iteration of the idea, rather than it being fully realised. When it comes to the combat and movement, Middle-earth is just Batman Arkham City mixed with Assassin's Creed. I usually wouldn't be so upfront when it comes to a game's similarities with other games, but the influences here are very blatant. In combat it's X to attack, but you can counter-attack if you press the Y button when an icon appears above an enemy's head. During the game you can unlock extra moves that you use after building up your combo. It feels exactly like Batman, which at the very least means that the combat is fun and fluid. There are some differences from that combat though, as instead of having different gadgets, you have wraith powers. This means that you can stun enemies by pressing B and then quickly slice them multiple times for a fury attack. You can also throw throwing knives with LT. The strength of this game and what ultimately makes it fun to play is the variety in the combat and how you can approach missions. Yes, you can go all in and take on a large group of orcs all at once, or you can use stealth to take out a few enemies beforehand. When you are crouched you can attract enemies to your location, turn enemies onto your side, or just straight up kill them. I definitely praise the variety here, as there are so many things you can do and nothing feels restricted or off limits in any mission. As well as charging in or going up behind enemies to kill them, you can stealthily take control of a number of enemies and create your own riot. If you don't want to do that, you can just use a bow and arrow to open up a caged creature that will do some of the work for you. If you don't want to do that, you can ride one of these creatures and use it to slaughter everyone. This is how you want missions to feel in an open world game, actually open. The story missions can be a bit more linear, but overall you're given the freedom to do what you want and when you want, and it makes playing this game fun. There are a number of different side missions and tasks to do. There are outcast missions which involve freeing human slaves. These missions are fine, as you just have to clear through certain areas of orcs and then cut slaves down, but they do become very repetitive towards the end, as there are 24 of these missions to complete. There are legend missions for your sword, bow and dagger. They're all challenges involving their particular weapons, so the sword ones are about slashing through enemies, the bow ones are about taking out enemies from afar, and the dagger ones are about killing enemies without being spotted. I played them because they're decent enough challenges, but they don't really do anything. There are perks you unlock by completing them, but you level up your weapons using experience that you earn by beating any mission, making these ones feel a little bit redundant. There are herb collecting challenges, but they just come down to keeping an eye out for certain herb icons on your map, and that's it. There are also hunting challenges that feel like a missed opportunity. There are 10 different creatures that you can hunt, but you encounter them all naturally during the story missions, so you don't actually have to properly hunt anything in this game. I actually ended up getting 100% completion, which took me around 20 hours. You could burn through the story in about 8 hours or less, so while it isn't the longest open world game out there, there's enough content here. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is a game I definitely enjoyed. Being able to approach missions in your own way makes it enjoyable, and this is helped by how fluid using a large number of different abilities feels. However, when compared to other open world games, it is lacking in areas. The story is weak, and splitting the open world in two makes it feel backwards. The influences here from other games also stop Middle-earth from really having its own personality. It's still a good game, but just don't expect anything special. My score is 7.5 out of 10. Hacking through orcs is always fun, but as an open world game being released in 2014, it's quite lacking.